Hello students, welcome back to Florence Academy. Let's decode the IELTS speaking test today. We all know that IELTS speaking test is a module where the student has to sit in front of the examiner and is being evaluated, is being judged on each and every word that he or she speaks. Let's understand how to tackle this module. For that, we need to understand the different parts of the speaking test. Everybody knows that the IELTS speaking test has got three parts, part 1, part 2 and part 3. Part 1. What is part 1? Part 1 of the IELTS speaking test is actually the easiest to impress the examiner because you are being asked questions on topics that you're familiar with, like culture, tradition, hometown, your hobbies, what kind of person are you, do you listen to music, do you love cooking, and these kind of questions which you can actually find answers to easily. This is the area where you can use your idioms, you can use complex structures, you can give good high lexical resources. You can actually expand the answer to 2 to 3 sentences and impress the examiner at this point of time because the topics are something that you don't have to think much about. Part 2 is a little tricky because it's an extempore round. You are given 1 minute only to prepare the topic and you are expected to start immediately and speak between 1 to 2 minutes. So sometimes the students ask me, can't I stop after 1 minute? How do you know how much is 1 minute? You are not able to track the time in your IELTS speaking test. The examiner tracks the time for you. So you will not know whether you have spoken for 1 minute or less than that. So if you have spoken for less than 1 minute, it means that you have not achieved your task. That is why it is always safe to speak till the examiner stops you so that you can give more idioms, more complex structures. You can use a variety of tenses depending on the past, the present and the future events that you're going to narrate in your cue card. Part 3 is the follow-up round. Here questions can get a little tricky because some examiners make it a point to frame new questions from your answers. In other words, it's impromptu. It is not scripted like in part 1. In part 1, the questions are somewhat scripted and it doesn't really depend on your answer. But in part 3, only some examiners make it a point to frame new questions from your answers. It also requires a lot of skill from the part of the examiner to do this. So that is when part 3 gets a little tricky, but don't worry, you can analyze the question deeply and give detailed and analytical answers in part 3. You are expected to give at least 4 to 5 sentences for each answer until and unless the examiner stops you in between. If the examiner has interrupted you in between, then don't worry, just go to the next question. Interruption is very common in the speaking test. How to generate ideas in the cue card or the part 2. I will tell you about the 5 wives and 1 husband in the next video. Stay tuned.